Welcome to this first episode in our Idea Launch series, which is focused on helping you create better software products. My name is Darrin. I'm the founder of Truefit. My background is software development. Joining me today is John Beck. John is Truefit's Director of Product Design. Welcome, John. Nice to have you here.
It is great to be here, Darrin.
I think, in this first episode, where we'd like to start maybe is not a topic that people think about a lot. I think usually when we're working with somebody, we work with a lot of business leaders. They have an idea. They see an important problem that needs to be solved. They say, hey, I think software can help. But they may or may not have a software team. They may or may not have ever built a product before. We work with a lot of people like that. But they have deep domain expertise, and they're applying that to a solution that they see, an opportunity that they see. One of the things that they don't necessarily think a lot about are the risks. But the reality is that, when you're at the beginning of the product development process, you're at the point of maximum risk because there are so many things that you don't know. There are a lot of things you do know, but there are so many things that you don't know. So what we'd like to do today is unpack some of these areas of risk that we're paying attention to really early on. So why don't you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, our teams, we've spent a lot of time over the years, helping to kind of widen our clients' understanding of risk. Naturally, they're concerned about money and time, but there are other important areas to look at. And so when we talk about risk, one of the first big ones that we look at is a question of value. Does your customer or customers in a more complex product, do they want this product? In other words, do you understand, a lot of times clients come to us with an understanding of, a feature list, or we need an app that can do X, Y, and Z. But how well do you really understand what the end goal, what the end outcome that your customer or that user is seeking? So we really have a number of methods. We use research. We use lots of ways to talk to customers and get them involved to help kind of illuminate or shed a light on what is the end goal that they're really trying to get to, that at the end of the day, they're kind of hiring your product to help them get to that right end thing.
Yeah. And
along with that, kind of, there's often confusion about what user experience design is all really about. Really at the heart of that is understanding that end goal for a user, and also, what comes before they start using your product, what comes, what else are they doing in parallel while they're using your product? Where do they come out, and how well can we stitch this product that we're going to make for you into their already busy and distracted lives, that we all suffer from attention span deficits. So
one of the risks is that as you think about you have to think about the product in its context. You have to think about the whole journey, exactly, the whole experience, and how it fits in. So there's not just risk that we're building the right features, but there's a risk in how this product is it valuable in the context that they're going to be using it. So we have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, something that they genuinely want, and you're the one to provide it to them in a way that nothing else can. And that's what really resonates. And ultimately, that's what leads to differentiation and to engagement and this positive experience, word of mouth, getting that really passionate, engaged user that we're all looking for. If we can figure that area of risk out, and we can get early confirmation that you're kind of barking up the right tree, that there is value and that people want you to solve that problem, then how we solve that problem becomes important. What is the information that needs to be presented at the right time in that experience? Is it really complex? Is it easy to understand? what's the simplest way to get somebody through that process, that they don't have to do any more work than is necessary. So a lot of these usability risks, start to come to the foreground of, given the constraints of the software or the data that we're accessing, or we're going to design a product that neatly navigates all of that and is really easy to use and doesn't require any more time than is necessary. So
the first risk is value. Do they want it?
Yep.
The second risk is usability.
And can
they use it? Is it easy?
Yeah.
Is it a pleasing experience?
Yeah.
Do they understand how to work their way through your product kind of intuitively, get from one step to the other?
Okay. Can they learn?
Yeah.
How to use it quickly and get up and running. And obviously, we work on a lot of different products. So some are simpler and easier to wrap your head around. Some are very, very complex and actually require training to use and, across an organization. So that risk will vary depending on the complexity of the product. Now, a third area is, we know that there's value. We think our solution is easy to use, but can we actually build it? And that's the feasibility risk. And that's really where, our engineers and our architects are able to kind of come in around the vision and confirm that, can we access the data that we need? Can we process that in a reasonable, amount of time, that it doesn't take a long time to process or display information, that we can store and secure and scale, all of that. Our feasibility risks about, can we do this?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about feasibility risk, technical feasibility, is that very often that risk also lies outside of the product we're creating, because our products interface into a lot of other systems in the world. It could be a back-end financial system. It could be any number of systems where we have to integrate and rely on those systems to create the whole experience.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things that we try to do really early on to drive down that risk is some R&D or proof of concept or something like that, to say, does this system, API, whatever, does it do what we think it's going to do, what the documentation says it's going to do?
Yeah.
So risk is not just, hey, can we create the software? It's like, are all the other systems that we're dependent on, are they also going to function?
Yeah. And, there are things that we can do to experiment early on and start to collect some evidence that, the answer is yes, we can build this, or yes, people do want this or desire it, or yes, we have evidence that this is going to be easy to use. There is a fourth area that a lot of times it's a little harder to pull out, and that's a question of viability. And when we talk about viability, it's, should we do this? From our client's perspective, are they in a place where, number one, they understand their business model, and that by building this product, it logically will align to what they need to do at a business level, like increase adoption or grow their revenues or lower their operating costs, or streamline their communications or supply chain, or are they ready as an organization to support the product? That is an interesting thing in terms of, if we have lots of content that has to be edited, or social channels that have to be moderated, there's roles and responsibilities within their organization they're going to have to be able to manage once the product goes live. And so that viability risk is often kind of hidden, and we help illuminate that as early in the process as we can. Start that conversation and get going around, when this thing goes live, it's going to change your organization in some significant ways.
Yeah, I can think of a couple of examples of products we worked on where the value was there, the usability was there, but when it came to the business model, either because of pricing or just because of the structure, like who is writing the check?
Right.
There have been a couple of examples, and people ask us this all the time, like, do you ever start working on something and design a solution and then decide not to build it? And one of the reasons that sometimes that happens, we decide not to build it, or our client decides not to build it, is because of this business viability risk. We decide, okay, we can create a compelling product. There's people who want to use it, but we can't find how they're going to pay for it, or what they're willing to pay is not enough to justify the investment.
Right.
And it's so important to unpack that up front. You don't want to get into even a MVP build and realize that you don't actually, you have a user, but not a customer. And so thinking about the difference between users and customers early on, and figuring out, will somebody pay? How much will they pay? Can I transition from creating a product to having a successful software company? That's a super important question early on.
Sustainability of, can we keep sustaining the growth that we need to hit the marks that the business needs to hit and keep this in play? We talk a lot, like within our teams early on, about this idea of outcomes over outputs. A lot of times it's easy to say, hey, we need software and it could do this and that. And wouldn't it be awesome if, and you're really kind of early on playing out feature lists. What we try to do when we engage with a client, the very first discussions are around, where do you need this to move your business in terms of outcomes? Like, what are the desired outcomes that we need to do? And that's a tricky thing. So when you're making software product, it's almost like a combination shot in billiards. We can't just, hit a button and move your business over in this direction. We have to do it through the product. So this question of risk becomes really important of how do we kind of narrow the focus strategically to make sure and test early on that if we build this in this way with these technologies, that it is going to have a reasonable chance of moving your business in the direction that you need it to go. So outcomes over outputs is a kind of mantra that we talk about a lot of, don't come in with the solution, but make sure that we understand the problem up front that the product has to solve.
So what happens, or what have you seen happen when people ignore some of these areas of risk? If they go in and don't think through this, and don't really put a process in place that helps to reduce these risks, to address them and reduce them. I know you pay a lot of attention to that. What's the process for reducing risk? And that's what we're helping people do so that they can create a product with confidence. But what happens when, we do work with people who are so excited about their idea and so confident that they have the right strategy that they hand wave these risk areas a little bit. What do you see happen when people don't pay attention to risk?
Well, when they don't pay attention to risk, there is a kind of exponential factor of, early on when we're in kind of strategy and design, there's effort to sort of develop your vision. But when we rush forward too fast into a build without digging into these areas of risk, the costs start to mount of, you're going to learn at some point. You're going to make this product. You're going to rush it to market, and then you're going to learn. But at that point, you've already committed to a tech stack. You've built the database. You've built the front end interface, and it is comparatively more expensive than to untangle things that could have been identified very early on. And that's a common scenario, is that, teams work, very hard to release a product on time and on budget. They get it out. It doesn't do what you were hoping that it would do in terms of engaging users, building market share. And you realize then that you built the wrong product, or you're not solving the right problem.
Yeah.
It could be a beautiful product and easy to use and well engineered, but it's not solving the right problem. And it could be expensive to untangle. Even further, if you get out products that need a lot of training, you've invested in marketing, customer support, those costs mount even higher, because if you're making really significant pivots at that point, there's cost associated with that. So what we try to do is really emphasize, and we talk a lot about it in our teams, is how do we balance rigor and speed? We do want to move quickly. We want to get you to market quickly. We want to get to code quickly so we can actually see and use and start to test software. But there are things up front. Where do we see the biggest risks, given those 4 buckets that we talked about? And how can we efficiently test that and start collecting some evidence that allows the team to pivot and shift when the cost to do that is comparatively so much lower?
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is the further you get into your product development process, the more expensive it is to address these risks. These risks exist.
Yeah.
You're going to bump into them at some point. They're unavoidable. So address them as early as you can with as little kind of expense as you can. Like when you haven't spent a lot of money, and of course when you get to building something and coding, like that's probably the most expensive place to make changes. But you also implied that not every risk is equally important. And so as you think about, how do you deal with that? I mean, you could throw up a bunch of risks. How do you think about prioritizing risk?
Yeah, there are a number of things that we do. We can't, sort of at the heart of that is we can't eliminate all risk completely from the process.
Or it would take too long.
Yeah,
so it's
or it
that
would be
balance.
So expensive that it wouldn't warrant, it would work against your interests in the long run. So we do a lot around prioritizing risk and helping to understand kind of what is most important. And part of what we do is a lot of, from a strategic standpoint, you're looking at assumptions. Where are we making assumptions about what users want, or how easy something's going to be, or we're assuming that we can build, this efficiently, or that there are not going to be any surprises. So we look along kind of 2 axes around importance and evidence. So how important is this assumption to the success of the product? And do we have any evidence that we're on the right track, that these assumptions are right? And when you kind of look at risk that way, the team starts to see a picture of kind of where you run into kind of critical assumptions, the ones that can really sink the success of the project early. So that's where we want to focus. And so we place a heavy emphasis on early prototyping, making sure that we're out front collecting evidence that users can use the solutions that were the early vision. So design prototypes, or what we call proofs of concept, where there is some working code behind it. And, maybe it's testing an algorithm, or integrating different data sources, and, we can generate a score here. And so, some of those early prototypes can be very lean. It might be a spreadsheet. It might be a pretty raw coded experiment in a browser, but we can use that, or it can be a click-through vision of what the design would look like. But here's how this person goes from point A to Z, completes the task, And early on, that's a big thing. We're trying to collect evidence, to make sure that those critical assumptions that we have ample or at least enough evidence from a lean perspective to say keep going forward or start to pivot. And often we learn some very important things in that process about, you're close, you're on the right track, but if it doesn't do this, I won't be able to sell it inside my organization, or I won't, we often run into, when is a task complete? Like when have we completely solved the problem? And there's a little bit of guesswork up front. We make prototypes, and the prototypes, we put them back in front of users, and that helps us understand that, have we completely solved? Like I helped you find a doctor. I helped you understand when their availability is, when to schedule it. But if I can't finish that off and actually get it to your calendar, or maybe send out a notification, it's not yet complete. And sometimes you learn things like that along the way. So early prototyping is a very important piece of that.
So what I hear you say, kind of the pattern that's forming is that these product risks are grounded in assumptions that we're making. So we kind of unpack these assumptions. It's grounded in uncertainty. And the antidote to risk is these insights that we try to gain through prototyping, through user interviews, through various means to begin to gain insight as early as possible that either proves or disproves a given assumption. I think, I know this is a factor for me. Like I very often go in and make a lot of assumptions, but I'm usually not aware of it. Like I'm kind of blind to my own assumptions. So the team helps me unpack that. And really through these early insights, we're starting to drive out risk, and we're driving towards some kind of key success factors. So as we start to eliminate risk, we're paying attention to some things that will make this product successful. What are those kind of categories of success factors, if you will, that we're paying attention to as we're reducing risk?
Yeah, there's a concept around what's called product market fit, and that's a common conversation. That product market fit is, you kind of are shooting for this target of, you understand the users and their needs, you know how to create value for them, and then you're executing on the solution. So you have a product that is attractive, engaging, easy to use, does the right things. And when we can prove that and we have real engagement with the market, that's the sort of golden sweet spot that you're looking for. You've achieved product market fit. You're retaining users is usually an important metric to watch. That people come in and continue to come back and use it repeatedly, appropriately to whatever product it is that you're trying to make. But product market fit is a really big thing.
Is there a key metric that you look at to say, okay, I've achieved it? It's such an elusive thing, but is there kind of a key metric? Is adoption that metric, or is it retention, or what would you say are some of the key metrics?
There's a number of them. What sometimes, in some cases, we know that we're getting close to product market fit, even just early on in kind of preparing your market, that you're going out and just based off, showing prototypes, that you can start to verify that, very strong demand for the product. Retention, once the product is out, retention is one of the key metrics that we look at of people are coming in and continue to use the product. And that will vary from product to product, because in some cases, in a consumer mobile app where you're making the decision whether to pull the app down from, whatever app store is one thing. In many other cases, we're dealing with licensed software or SaaS, enterprise software where the buying decision is made by management and the day-to-day users have to use that. So engagement, customer satisfaction scores are key to that. And
revenue.
Yeah, obviously revenue is a factor in that. But when we talk about those outcomes, are we really getting traction towards the right outcomes? And so the metrics will align to. It's somewhat dependent on what the outcome that you're seeking is.
Yeah. What are some other success factors that we pay attention to throughout the process?
Software is complex. One that comes to mind is stakeholder alignment. So a lot of times, we're not just working with a singular client. When we do, you might have a VP of product that's responsible for the product, but there are many other stakeholders in the organization, from sales and marketing and customer support and regulatory. And do they all have the same vision? That really undermines the success of the team that's trying to design and build the product when the stakeholders are all off in different places, in terms of what they expect and what they want. So early on, we do go through an effort to make sure that we're all aligned around that. It gets more complex when we start having third parties involved, or, maybe there's an integration or a partnership with another company. So they can, over time, not be fully aligned. It's like the parallel tracks that aren't 100% parallel. And over time, you find that we're really on pretty divergent tracks. So there's a lot of effort around alignment, around vision, around the outcomes that we're seeking after. That is a big success factor, or can undermine the success.
Yeah, I think we sometimes are working with somebody who says, we've had this idea for a while and we just can't get it off the ground. And when we work with somebody, they often come from a place of being stuck. One of the reasons they're stuck is team alignment. And by focusing on aligning the team early in the process, it really helps them to get unstuck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the funny thing. Risk is, it's going to vary with every project, that these 4 buckets of risk that we're talking about are present in every project, but not in the same degree, or, one might be more critical than another. So the teams are pretty adept at calling that out and figuring out, where the real priorities are. They're not always evenly distributed, in neat little buckets. But time and time again, this process of identifying the critical outcomes, understanding kind of where the risks are and what assumptions are driving that, and then how can we get in early and test, has proven to be instrumental in the success of our project. So, there are lots of, when it happens, it's pretty magical, that it's a really,
I'm sure there's a lot of examples
thing.
That come to mind.
Yeah, to see. I mean, we were working on a very complex enterprise application, meant for some of the world's largest corporations, some of the world's largest universities, hospital, healthcare systems, all as a way of assessing and improving their cybersecurity defense. So a kind of sobering
topic that's on everybody's mind these days. It's like super important. I think everybody's thinking about this.
They literally had NASA researchers, that were sort of developing some of the smarts around ways to calculate and score progress in these areas. But we were able to get in and kind of help them understand kind of where these risks were. And we tested it at different points in the process. But when you're in there, I remember, very early, we had an early build of the software, and we could solve at least one of several problems pretty completely, and we wanted to show that. So we were doing, live testing with some of these chief security officers from these companies all over the world, and different time zones and all of that. And what we learned out of that was, number one, we were solving the right problems. They thought, there was a very positive reaction to the overall usability and user interface. But we learned that, while the software was very heavily focused on kind of maybe one business unit at a time, and the general feedback was, this is awesome, but if it only can sort of focus on this one business unit, we needed to focus on all of these. Like when you're a big global company and you have 13, 14 business units worldwide, we want to be collecting all this data and rolling it up to one global, 50,000 foot view of our security practices. And
so there's value risk in there. There's usability risk there.
Technical feasibility. But what we found was, we had a great architecture and we had a lot of good design patterns in place, that it was a pivot, but it wasn't as difficult as we thought. And boy, did it ramp the value of the product. And after we were able to demonstrate that, it took a little bit of time and re-engineering, but was a critical pivot before the market release. They were able to definitely light up a number of corporate clients that they might have had a hard time getting to. They were able to increase their expected licensing fees for the software because there was nobody else that did what we did. And when we were hearing that we were helping these groups, these security officers, take processes that would take weeks in their organization and down to a matter of hours, super exciting, and clearly impacted bottom line. And when we talk about outcomes, like much more efficient, much more secure, much easier to communicate upward to their boards.
Taking a topic like cybersecurity that's super complex,
right,
and making it simple so executives, board members could understand, okay, here's where we are, here's where we're going, here's how we're getting more secure.
That all came out of that understanding of risk and our efforts to mitigate that on the client's behalf.
That's a fantastic example, I think, of how all this comes together throughout the process.
Yeah.
That was not something that happened instantaneously. It's something that we unpacked over time and as we learn. So I think that's good. This has been super enlightening for me. I appreciate this conversation. If you had kind of one piece of advice relative to this area of risk as a key takeaway, what would you say is like the one thing to remember for somebody out there who's thinking about a new product, they're getting started, they see a hard problem that needs to be solved, and they're thinking about building some software? What's the kind of one key piece of advice relative to risk?
Yeah, I would say that effort, that getting the team aligned around the outcomes that you're trying to get to. What are the key problems that we need to solve, and not getting too hardened or fixed on a particular solution, but understanding that these early experiments are all around, are we getting that evidence that we will effectively move you towards the outcome that you're seeking? And, if so, great. And if not, what do we need to tweak? But getting that up early in the process and allowing the teams to bring all their creativity and all their expertise, all their ability to kind of help navigate the trade-offs, it all comes from that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So we hope this was helpful and informative as you're thinking about building a great software product. If this was helpful and you would like to learn more, we're going to continue the conversation in our next episode, where we're going to be focusing on the discovery process. What's the process actually look like? And what are the steps, and how do we do it? That's what we're going to be focusing on in the next episode. If this was helpful to you, push subscribe so that you can Get notifications of all of the upcoming episodes, and we'll see you there.